Welcome to the IISS this afternoon. India's relationship with Pakistan is important for the stability and prosperity of the South Asian region and beyond. But this has been a difficult and tense bilateral relationship. Over 2 years ago, India halted official talks with Pakistan due to an intensification of violence and firing across the line of control that divides the Kashmir region. Since then, there have been spurts of intense firing across their borders, resulting in casualties on both sides. India's new Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, made an initial attempt at his formal swearing-in ceremony last May to resume the official dialogue between the two foreign secretaries. But this did not take place last August, as scheduled because of a meeting between the Pakistani envoy in Delhi and the Kashmiri Hurriyat group. The visit of India's new Foreign Secretary, Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar, to Islamabad at the beginning of this month marks the resumption of India's official engagement with Pakistan after 2 years. 2 days ago, Prime Minister Modi tweeted his greetings on Pakistan's National Day with a message that all outstanding issues with Pakistan can be resolved through bilateral dialogue in an atmosphere free from terror and violence. If and when this official bilateral dialogue is resumed, what could be its contours and focus? Would it be a resumption of the long-held composite dialogue or a revision of it? What could be its prospects for normalizing relations between India and Pakistan? To discuss these and related issues, I am delighted to welcome our speaker this afternoon, Ambassador Kanwal Sibal. Ambassador Sibal was the Foreign Secretary of India, the head of India's Foreign Ministry in 2002-2003 under the previous Bharatiya Janata Party-led government. He has also served as India's Deputy Chief of Mission in Washington, D.C., and Ambassador of India to Turkey, Egypt, France, and Russia. Ambassador Sibal.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Rahul Chaudhary, for inviting me to speak at the IISS on a subject that most Indian diplomats have spent their life discussing and trying to understand how relations between India and Pakistan can be normalized in the interests of both countries. One has two choices. One is to be extremely diplomatic and try and project a hopeful picture that at some stage we'll be able to resolve our issues with Pakistan. Or one can be a little more candid and express a more realistic view of where we've been in the past with regard to our dialogue with Pakistan, where we stand at present, and does the experience of the past and the present give us reasonable hope that at least in the future, near future, we'll be able to resolve the outstanding issues between the two countries. Now, I believe that to see what could be the way forward in resuming the dialogue, we should look at what has happened in the past and what the situation is at present and what one could realistically expect in the future. Now, all of you are experts. You have been studying the India-Pakistan relationship, and in many ways, those who've been past officials have dealt with this issue, and you have your own thinking and views. And you may also be reasonably aware of the stages that we've gone through in terms of our previous dialogues with Pakistan. But I thought it might be useful, nevertheless, to recapitulate what has been happening in recent years, simply to underline the fact that we've had several rounds of dialogue with Pakistan. So it's not as if it has not been attempted by us in the hope of being able to find solutions. But unfortunately, the basic issues between the two countries have remained unresolved. We've been able to achieve some partial results in some areas, but what Pakistan calls the core issues or the core issue remains unresolved. Now, because the underlying reasons for tensions and conflict have endured, the dialogue process has not been smooth and has been interrupted many times. One can count the number of times we have talked fruitlessly to find a solution to our bilateral problems, and if we are to derive a lesson from this, then I think it'll give us a clue of what we can expect in the future. Let me very briefly mention, without going into details, the very intensive dialogue that took place between Swaran Singh and Bhutto after the 1962 conflict, Sino-Indian conflict, which was prodded by the United States and the UK. But what was the result of that? The result of that was the 1965 India-Pakistan conflict provoked by Pakistan. Now, in 1997, the composite dialogue between the two countries was initiated. Now, this has had a checkered history. It has been interrupted and resumed several times without any significant breakthroughs. Now, from my point of view, the Indian side has taken many serious political initiatives to engage Pakistan in recent years. Now, Vajpayee, the former Prime Minister, took the dramatic initiative in February 1999 to visit Lahore by bus. And the Lahore Declaration was signed. He thought he had buried once and for all the Pakistani fears that India has yet not accepted the creation of Pakistan by visiting the Minar-e-Pakistan. But what was the result? Within a few months, in May 1999, the Kargil War was provoked by Pakistan. And this came as a serious political shock to India. And let me remind you that Nawaz Sharif was Prime Minister then. In July 2001, Vajpayee took another dramatic step, this time to invite the architect of Kargil, General Musharraf, to Agra for a summit. The talks collapsed over the issue of Pakistan's support for terrorism against India. The Pakistani reaction was swift. In October 2001, the Jammu and Kashmir Assembly was attacked by terrorists. In December 2001, the Indian Parliament was attacked by Pakistan-based terrorists. India, in response, massed its troops on the India-Pakistan border, but without taking any military action. But as is been the way we've been looking at our relationship with Pakistan, in April 2002, India began exploring once again the possibility of a dialogue with Pakistan, this time being a little more cautious and wanting to go step by step. We restored the diplomatic relations with Pakistan in July 2003, and a ceasefire was agreed to by the two countries in November 2003. Vajpayee, once again, initiated a dialogue, visited Islamabad in January 2004, when the Islamabad Declaration was signed that committed Pakistan not to permit the territory under its control to be used for terrorism against India. But even at that time, and I had noticed that and I reflected that in my writing, Pakistan created ambiguity about whether this commitment applied to Jammu and Kashmir, as Pakistan does not consider Jammu and Kashmir as part of Indian territory. Now, this initiative was followed by 4 rounds of the composite dialogue. And once again, the dialogue had to be interrupted. Why? Because the Pakistani-sponsored terrorist groups attacked Mumbai, as you all know, in November 2008. Now, it was not as if Mumbai was not preceded by other terrorist attacks. It simply is that India, because of its anxiety to maintain the channels of dialogue open with Pakistan, did not break off the dialogue, despite the fact that in this period when the composite dialogue was taking place, Pakistani abetted terrorism took place in India at irregular intervals, targeting Indian cities, railway networks, religious places, scientific and financial institutions. Why was the dialogue not erupted? This was because Manmohan Singh believed and said so publicly that we cannot choose our neighbors, that India has no choice but to engage Pakistan. And I think there was also this feeling in Indian political circles that Pakistan would perhaps realize in its own interest to give up terrorism and move towards normalization of relations with India. Now, true to precedent, quite quickly after the Mumbai attacks, contacts were established with Pakistan, with the foreign secretaries of the two countries meeting in Colombo in February 2009, and Manmohan Singh meeting Zardari at Ekaterinburg in July 2009, where Zardari said he had a limited mandate but had the courage to say that Pakistani territory cannot be used for terrorism against India. In July 2009, Manmohan Singh met Gilani, Pakistani Prime Minister, on the margins of the NAM summit at Sharm el-Sheikh. And in the joint declaration issued, to my mind, India made a very vital political concession by formally delinking dialogue from terrorism, besides agreeing to a reference to Balochistan, which caused a political storm in India. In September 2009, the foreign secretaries and the foreign ministers of the two countries met in New York. In February 2010, the two foreign secretaries met again in New Delhi. In April 2010, Manmohan Singh met his Pakistani counterpart in Thimphu in Bhutan. And the two asked, to my mind rather optimistically, that their foreign ministers and foreign secretaries should work to bridge the trust deficit between the two countries. Now, this was followed by 2 rounds of composite dialogue, which were completed. And in September 2012, the Indian foreign minister visited Islamabad to review the progress of these 2 rounds. His counterpart, Hina Rabbani Khar, true to form, dismissed Indian allegations of Pakistan abetting terrorism against India, calling them without any substance, and used the argument that Pakistan uses, which to my mind, in the context of India-Pakistan is entirely specious, that Pakistan was itself a victim of terrorism, so how could it be supporting terrorism anywhere? And surprisingly, she lectured India against being obsessed with Mumbai and wanted India to move beyond Mumbai. Now, despite these provocations, a 3rd round of composite dialogue began in December 2012. Then, of course, there was a change of political leadership in Pakistan. In May 2013, Nawaz Sharif was elected Prime Minister. Manmohan Singh, with great alacrity, sent his special representative Lamba to meet Nawaz Sharif even before he took charge formally, and apparently conveyed the message that to implement Nawaz Sharif's declared commitment to improve ties with India, he should at least move forward on the trial of Lakhvi. Nawaz Sharif, in turn, sent his emissary Shahryar Khan to India with a message for Manmohan Singh. As usual, the atmosphere was vitiated again in August 2013 when the Pakistanis killed 5 Indian soldiers on the line of control. In September 2013, Manmohan Singh and Nawaz Sharif met in New York and decided to control the situation on the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir by having their DGMOs, the Director General of Military Operations, meet in December 2013. Now, despite all these contacts, Nawaz Sharif resiled on his promise to grant India MFN status, linking it to a resumption of the dialogue process. And then, as you all know, in May 2014, the newly elected Prime Minister Modi invited Nawaz Sharif and other SAARC leaders to his swearing-in ceremony and announced the resumption of foreign secretary level contacts between the two countries. In August 2014, just a few days before the Indian Foreign Secretary was to visit Islamabad, the Pakistani High Commissioner met the Hurriyat in New Delhi, and the talks were called off. Now, in March this year, following Modi's initiative, the Indian Foreign Secretary has visited Islamabad. The Pakistan ambassador has met the Hurriyat leaders again after the Foreign Secretary's visit, making it clear that Pakistan will not budge from its entrenched positions. So the ups and downs of the India-Pakistan dialogue thus continue. Now, if and when a formal dialogue is resumed, a decision will have to be taken whether the format will remain the same or will need modification. My own fear is that if the existing agenda, those 8 points, is maintained, the dialogue will continue to be as sterile as it has been in the past and will not provide any breakthroughs, because the same position will be repeated by both sides on the same agenda items, and at the end of the day, some wishy-washy joint statement will be issued and we'll carry on as before. But to be fair, I would say that some marginal gains have been achieved as a result of these contacts and these various rounds of dialogues between the two countries. For example, ceasefire has been holding reasonably well until recently. Bus and train services have been established between the two countries. The Joint Economic Commission and the Joint Business Council have been activated. Cross-LOC trade in Jammu and Kashmir is taking place. And some other movement has taken place on the trade front on the Wagah border. These are relatively minor gains, as we are close neighbors and the potential is enormous. But nevertheless, purely in terms of noting some positives that have emerged from this dialogue, I thought I should mention this. Now, I know that that a lot of people perhaps in this audience believe that Nawaz Sharif means well. He wants to have good relations with India. He wants to work for that. But India is being difficult. India is not being responsive. India, as the major country, should take the lead, should take the initiative, and open out to Pakistan. The other argument given is that Nawaz Sharif is a civilian government that is in power, and India should help strengthen Nawaz Sharif's political hands against the armed forces, etc., etc. But I have been carefully noting the public pronouncements of Nawaz Sharif, because that is far more important than just a blanket statement that he wants good relations with India. Because if he wants good relations in India, it should be evident in his public pronouncement, as well as some actions on the ground. Now, right from the day one that he's come to power, he's been showing a strong determination to bring the Kashmir issue on the front burner. He made a very aggressive speech at the UNGA in September 2013. I compared that speech with the speeches made by the previous Pakistani leaders, and this was much more aggressive in tone and content than even those made by General Musharraf. You would notice that he never mentions the Simla Agreement. Why? Because he's been very proactive in seeking US intervention, British intervention on the Kashmir issue, worried to speak about the Simla Agreement, which enjoins the two countries to deal with the Kashmir issue and other issues bilaterally. He would not then be able to do what he's doing in terms of seeking third-party intervention. He had promised forward movement on the Mumbai trial. You read his statements, but nothing has happened. On the contrary, we find that Lakhvi, the charade of Lakhvi getting bail, not getting bail, arrested, re-arrested, that is going on, because Lakhvi is being charged under the Preventive Detention Act of Pakistan and not the Anti-Terrorism Act. And certainly he's not being tried by the military courts that have been set up in Pakistan to fast-track the cases against terrorists. His rhetoric on Jammu and Kashmir has become very provocative. On various occasions, even recently, he's called Kashmir the jugular vein of Pakistan. Now, the implication of this, of course, is that India's suffocating grip on Pakistan's jugular vein has somehow to be loosened. Serious ceasefire violations have taken place on the line of the ceasefire LOC in Jammu and Kashmir, but not only that, this time the novelty is that a lot of these violations have taken place across the international border. There are two reasons. One, of course, the Kashmir elections, but more than that, if infiltrators and would-be terrorists try to enter Jammu and Kashmir from the north, it takes them almost a week to be able to reach populated areas. When they cross the international border, they are immediately within populated area. It just so happens that these areas are being populated by the Hindu community. So it's very easy for them to find targets and conduct their terrorist activity. The infrastructure of terrorism has remained intact, though it is a fact that Pakistan is also fighting the TTP in the West. But insofar as the Punjab-based jihadi groups are concerned, Pakistan is not acting against them because these jihadi groups are not targeting the Pakistan military or the Pakistan government, and therefore the fact that in the past they have been looked upon as assets of the Pakistan military, that position has not changed. And then, of course, as you all know, and since you're all experts on Pakistan, how much Nawaz Sharif's party depends on these extremist groups for its own political electoral reasons in Punjab. And a symptom of this is the space that Nawaz Sharif government also has given to Hafiz Saeed, and I will not spell out more what is happening on the ground. Insofar as the sanctions on Jamaat Dawa is concerned, you are aware of the very cryptic way in which the Pakistan government has pronounced on this issue. Now Pakistan is raising the water issue in a big way. And what is, to my mind, a step to further complicate our dialogue with Pakistan is that they are now accusing India of supporting terrorism in Pakistan, both in Fatah and actually also pointing a finger at India for the Peshawar incidents. General Musharraf has publicly said this, and a minister in the Nawaz Sharif government too has said this. Now, I can't see how, with this kind of a enlarged agenda of differences with India, you can look forward to any constructive dialogue with Pakistan. Now, I've been asking the Pakistani side, including the Pakistani ambassador a few weeks ago, is that what is it that Pakistan and Nawaz Sharif want in Jammu and Kashmir? Please spell it out. You want more territory, you will not get it. So what do you want? I mean, raising the issue is fine, but it should be done with some kind of a strategic purpose. If the strategic purpose is simply to continue the confrontation with India and keep projecting India as an enemy, fine, that is being served, but then that is totally contrary to the other language or discourse of Nawaz Sharif and Pakistan, that they want to normalize relations with India. So I can't see how you can want to claim Indian territory and yet say we want peaceful relations with India. These two things are incompatible. And he's whipping up public sentiment in India on the Kashmir issue, which to my mind will make it even more difficult for him later to arrive at any reasonable understanding with India on this issue. Now, from our point of view, quite apart from other factors which I won't go into, the whole issue of a dialogue with Pakistan and reaching understanding with Pakistan, even with regard to some openings in Jammu and Kashmir, has been enormously complicated by the fact of the rise of Islamism in Pakistan. The kind of attacks that we see internally in Pakistan, the terrorism that is rampant there, the attacks on Shias and on Sufi shrines, the growth of what you might call loosely fundamentalism in Pakistan. This is a problem. And the more Pakistan goes into that direction, the more difficult it will be for any reasonable people on both sides to be able to strike some kind of a via media in terms of a bilateral relationship. I would also like to point, while I'm on this subject, the recent elections in Jammu and Kashmir, where surprisingly the results have been such that this has led to a remarkable understanding, tie-up between the PDP, which also is a quasi-separatist party, and the BJP. And a part of this common program that they've agreed to is that a dialogue with Pakistan should be initiated. And this should set at rest some comments that you get here and there, that India is not interested in a dialogue, BJP is not interested, RSS is not interested. And here is a situation where, with the approval of the RSS, the BJP has signed a coalition agreement with the PDP and agreed as part of that to begin a dialogue with Pakistan. Now, our Foreign Secretary just visited Pakistan. You must have seen what was said during the course of this visit. There's been no change in Pakistan's discourse. In fact, the Pakistani Foreign Secretary said publicly that Kashmir is a central issue for Pak leadership and the public, which is deeply attached to this cause, and talked about addressing the water issue. He spoke publicly about self-determination and UN resolutions, and added to the contentiousness of our relations by actually saying that India is supporting terrorism. It is involved in Balochistan and Fatah, equating Mumbai with Samjhauta, etc., etc. And on our side, I find that our Foreign Secretary also said the usual things about Pakistan needing to bring those accused of Mumbai to trial, and of Pakistan dealing with terrorism. So I don't see any change of discourse, even when this step has been taken to resume Foreign Secretary level contacts. Let me quickly go through some of the issues of the agenda items of the composite dialogue, just to give you an idea of my perspective on what could or could not be achieved in regard to those issues. One is Siachen. There's a lot of talk that is low-hanging fruit and you must cull it and this and that and that. But nobody has actually pointed out the fact that it was Pakistan that first, if you like, created, or rather not created, did what might be called cartographic aggression by extending the ceasefire line, which in the 1949 ceasefire agreement and the 1972 ceasefire agreement stops at NJ 9842 and then simply says, and then northwards to the glaciers. So Pakistan drew a line on the basis of what the Americans had done earlier, because this is the Cold War, drew the line to the Karakoram Pass, which means the Chinese are on the other side. I think as a first step, if Pakistan wants a resolution of the Siachen issue in whatever way, it must undo its cartographic aggression and change its maps and reflect what is actually being agreed to in the ceasefire agreements between the two countries. We have this other problem now of Chinese encroachments into Ladakh. There have been a couple of serious incidents recently. China's presence in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir has become a huge source of problem for us. And there are views in India that this way China has entrenched itself as a third party to the India-Pakistan problems in Jammu and Kashmir. As it is, China is occupying large swathes of Indian territory in the north, in Ladakh. And by coming into the POK, it's an encircling movement. They, in fact, are now taking physical possession of even parts of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir through these long gestation infrastructure projects that they intend to finance. Apparently, they've set aside $40 billion for the purpose. Yes, in the past, India was suffering a great deal from weather casualties in in Siachen, but those have been reduced to a single figure. And of course, our position is that if Pakistan wants demilitarization of Siachen, then it must authenticate the actual positions of the Indian armed forces in Siachen.
Yeah.
A very brief comment, actually. It's very difficult for any Indian government to deal with government of Pakistan, because Pakistan civilian governments are into office but never in power. Everything is decided by the army. So even if you decide on some mutual concessions, India will make concessions. When it comes Pakistan's turn to respond, Pakistan's army will veto it. So it's useless.
Kiran Hassan, Dr. Kiran Hassan. Yes, sorry, yes.
Masters, thank you so much for your very informative talk. My question is, you didn't really touch upon Afghanistan. Could you tell me what kind of, how the two countries are likely to have, what kind of role are they planning, or especially Delhi, what kind of engagement does Delhi
With Afghanistan?
vis-a-vis Afghanistan? So touch upon that. Thank you.
Okay, the last ones is just, yes, quickly, please.
I have a very short comment, and then I have a question also.
Could you identify yourself?
I'm Tahar Azad. I'm a visiting fellow at Bristol University. What India has policy for terrorist group in its territory, especially like during the last 20 years, 65,000 people have been killed. So, and again, that Pakistan is not the only, you can say, the country involved in, you can say, terrorist activities in India. Pakistan has also suffered many things, but from your speech, we can guess that all are innocent in, Indian side, and Pakistan basically is the rogue state. But in my point of view, there are also some other elements. They don't want to see, you can say, the peaceful environment between two states. So again, during the last few months, Pakistan is seriously engaged with TTP and other terrorist group in Pakistan. So now there is no discrimination whether it's TTP or it's Lashkar Jhangi or blah, blah, blah. And now my question is that what is the actual role of India in Afghanistan, which is basically creating a, you can say, again, a gap between Pakistan and India. So do you think that in future Afghanistan will be a big problem for both states?
Okay. All right. Insofar as the first question is concerned, yes, I did not speak too much about the economic and other issues. That is part of the composite dialogue. And some steps have been taken in that regard. The volume of trade between the two countries has increased. It's about $2.6 billion today. Maybe another $3.5 billion of trade is occurring through third countries like Dubai. The idea on both sides is to see if we can actually directly trade with each other, and for which conditions should be created. However, there are three things that stand in the way. One is that there are lobbies in Pakistan still who do not want to normalize economic relations with India because they feel that their interests will suffer, whether it's the agricultural lobby or the automotive industry, so they are a big bloc. Number two, it's not terribly important whether Pakistan gives us MFN status or it doesn't give us MFN status. But the fact that they are incapable of giving MFN status to India shows where the root problem is. They don't want to call it MFN because they say they'll not be able to justify to the Pakistani public how India can be treated as the most favored nation. So we agreed on a formula. It can be non-discriminatory market access, NDMA. Even that has not been given. You know, the agreement to give us MFNA was reached in December 2011. Then it was not given for various reasons. Then when Nawaz Sharif came, informally he told us that this is the first thing he's going to do. He didn't do it because he somehow linked this to the start of resumption of the dialogue with India. Before that, we were told that, elections are coming in Pakistan, and let's wait till after the elections, when the new government comes to power, then they will give this MFN status. Nothing has happened. Pakistan still maintains a negative list. Within SAFTA, South Asian Free Trade Association, we've been trying to see if Pakistan can actually, at the end of it, normalize trade relations with India, not in a bilateral framework, but in a regional framework, which would then make it appear that Pakistan has been compelled by SARC obligations to treat India as a normal trading partner. Even that has not happened. They are maintaining a negative list. They don't allow Indian products to be sold to Pakistan through Wagah border. They have a list of about 113 products that can only cross Wagah. All the others have to go by sea to Karachi, which means therefore the cost of transportation adds up to the cost of our goods, and therefore that detracts from expanding our trade. We have, as part of our obligation to create better conditions for trade with Pakistan, developed what is called an integrated checkpost at Wagah, etc., etc. The Pakistanis haven't done it on their side. They will not allow Indian goods to be transported from India to Afghanistan through Pakistan. They could earn revenue from this. They are not willing to do that. So what do you do? What do you do? We are where we are. And and again, people tell us, oh no, Nawaz Sharif is a businessman. He understands business. And on this, he will move because he knows where the interests of Pakistan lie. But in actual fact, this has not happened. We have actually proposed sale of electricity to Pakistan, 500 megawatts line to be created. We have proposed transport of supply of gas to Pakistan to meet its energy shortage. We have actually passed legislation that allows Indian companies to invest in Pakistan, to develop its resources, coal resources, etc., etc. But nothing is happening. And Pakistan said, no, you have non-tariff barriers, and unless you remove them. And I tell them, look, within India and the rest of the world and between themselves, they all give each other MFN treatment, but there are so many non-tariff barrier issues that keep coming up in our relations with EU, for instance. So these NTB questions you can always raise later, but at least, for heaven's sake, normalize that trade relations. This not happen. Now, insofar as Afghanistan is concerned, Ashraf Ghani is coming to India. I think it was supposed to be towards the end of March, and we'll be able to see clearly where we stand. For the time being, I think we are a bit concerned about developments in Afghanistan and the line that Ashraf Ghani has taken, which is precisely the line that Karzai had taken initially and from a certain point of view, rationally so, since Pakistan is the most important actor in Afghanistan, that if Afghanistan could settle its problems with Pakistan, then the overall situation of Afghanistan economically and otherwise would ease greatly. And today, after the US forces completely withdraw and the responsibility of security falls entirely on the Afghan national forces, there is added urgency in Ashraf Ghani's mind that he needs to settle the problem with Pakistan, which is why he went and met Rahil Sharif at the military headquarters in Rawalpindi, etc., etc. There's someone on our side say that, as I said, Karzai has gone through this, and sooner or later he'll discover that his wishes will not be fulfilled, and he will learn the right lesson the hard way. There is this big issue of the attempt to bring the Taliban into play and give them a share of power. I continue to be surprised because the British are very supportive of this. The Americans somewhat less so, but the British are taking the lead in this as to why is it that a distinction is being made between the Taliban and, let's say, the Islamic State or anybody else, because these people did the very things which the Islamic State is doing in Iraq and Syria. It's the same ideology, the same kind of conduct, the same views on anti-modernity, anti-women, etc., anti-minorities, everything else, anti-Shias. But yet there is an attempt to give them a share of power. Whether this will be a proverbial camel in the tent and the Taliban induction into the Afghan political system would actually ultimately destabilize the whole system remains to be seen. But it's a point of worry for us because we are in the region, and all that is happening is that it is stoking Pakistan's strategic ambitions in Afghanistan, and the anti-Indian element in that is very strong. But we'll be happy to be proved wrong, and if Afghanistan and Pakistan can settle the bilateral problems without it being at the cost of India, we will be very happy with that situation.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Sybil. We must end now. We've gone over time. When you started your presentation, you said that you would present a realistic view of the relationship between India and Pakistan, and not a diplomatic view. And I think clearly you have presented a realistic view. But I think you've also, I think, made an important point about the Prime Minister Modi's initiatives towards a relationship and engagement, maybe a dialogue at some stage with Pakistan. You've talked about the concerns that are there. But in many ways, I think what you've presented to us today is clearly a pessimistic view on the nature of the relationship, but in many ways a realistic view. And for that, we are grateful to you, and thank you for taking the time to come here and to make a presentation and respond to our questions. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.